Okay, Nancy, stand by if you can, because the secretary is speaking in Nashville. Let's go ahead and listen to a little bit.
We also cover FEMA. FEMA is a disaster response agency, but it also is the agency that's entrusted to run the government on our very worst day. If we had a tragedy in this country where we needed someone to step up because our leadership was not able to, that agency would be entrusted to do that and to maintain our critical infrastructure. So they ensure that they go forward and maintain our electrical grid and our critical infrastructure such as water and systems that we rely on every day to help the American people be safe and to still have their way of life. We also have CISA, which some of you may have worked with them, which is our cybersecurity agency, which goes out and not only hunts down bad actors that would attack us on our cyber systems, but also gives us mitigation measures for how we can harden our systems. All of these entities work together to serve the American people and to make sure that we're prepared for any threats that we may face, but also respond to them in a way that honors what our ideals are. The sacred duty of our government truly is that people are entrusted to secure the rights also of all the American people. You know, the Declaration of Independence states that governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed, which is the people. The people give us the right to do our jobs each and every day. And as long as this world is fractured and as long as human nature is fallen, we will need brave men and women who step up and serve and enforce our rights and our laws and our values. And that's what all of you do in this room with your colleagues. The heroism was on full display this last week when we saw the attack in Austin, Texas, and we saw that the first responders that helped protected people and more lives there were our law enforcement that responded immediately. Instead of running away, they ran to it. And though we lost 3 lives and saw many other people injured, they prevented so many other lives from being lost. We're very grateful that they are willing to do that and to serve in such a way. In fact, it reminded me of the quote that is often attributed to George Orwell that states, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalves," which means you step up in order to protect people, and you do it in a way that other people often are never going to be required to. When tragedies like what we saw in Austin take place, it's your leadership and it's your decision-making that make all the difference. You use judgment, and people entrust you with their lives. You're on the front lines of leadership, and you have the responsibility of guiding and also shaping the next generation. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for what you do. I know that I've met many of you in the room. I've had the chance to visit with you. I appreciate your wisdom and your advice as we continue to develop trainings and insight into how leadership can work together to make good decisions and to break down the silos between agencies so that we can work together more different, in better ways than we have in the past. And you know we're seeing challenges across the country from judges and courts that are working to stop some of our efforts, that are looking to take away some of the protections that you need in law to do your work. And then also we're seeing some challenges from sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. In fact, after I get done sharing a few more words, I want to hear your questions on ways that we can help you do your jobs. If you're in a situation where the laws may be a little different than it is in other states, or you may have unique challenges that perhaps we could work together on to find ways to help you bring criminals to justice and to protect your community from public safety threats. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's the greatest country in the world that has great cities and great communities. Regardless of where people live, we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to go to work every day safely and to send their kids to school safely every day. Sanctuary cities do give us a challenge, because it makes it difficult at times for law enforcement to do.
All right, let's go ahead and bring back CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez as Secretary Noem continues there to speak in Nashville. I wanted to ask you, Nancy, and I need to ask my control room if we have the sound ready. There was a particular exchange between Democratic Senator Dick Durbin and Kristi Noem during this Capitol Hill testimony, and we do have it, and I want to play it.
How did you think that calling them domestic terrorists at that scene was somehow going to calm the situation?
You know, Senator, we are working in those situations where there's a tragic loss of life and that there is something that our agents are involved in, that we continue to deliver information.
Is it so hard to say you were wrong?
We continue, as these investigations continue to go, we will provide, I absolutely strive to provide factual information, and we'll continue to do that.
And when you fail, do you admit it publicly?
Absolutely. We always know that there's room for improvement.
This was a notable exchange to me at the time. And when we were talking about sort of the straw that broke the camel's back and we're parsing out what led to this was, of course, in reaction to the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis in Operation Metro Surge. And we know that the president's reaction, particularly after the killing of Alex Preddy, did not match what we were hearing from DHS.
Right. And I think that that just exemplifies the somewhat tricky situation that Kristi Noem was in, partly of her own making. On one hand, she was asked multiple times, not just by Durbin, but by other Democrats in the House and Senate, about the fact that she called Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist within hours of his death. And she, again and again, would not apologize, would not say it was a mistake, would not say that she had done anything wrong. And in that sense, she was kind of following the president's lead, which is never admit a mistake, never say you were wrong. And you know, we know from sources behind the scenes that she said actually she was given that language by the president's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller. But at the same time, there was sort of an unwillingness to accept the reality, which is that it was very clear from the very beginning that this is not someone who was a domestic terrorist. He is now dead. Why is she now not saying that that was a mistake? All she would say was, we're now investigating, so I can't say that he wasn't a domestic terrorist because we're investigating. Well, then why did you say he was a domestic terrorist if there was an investigation that hadn't happened yet? So, you know, that exchange and so many others went viral for a reason, because she wasn't providing sort of the common sense answer that a lot of senators and House members were looking for.
One more quick question to you, Nancy. Do we know anything about her new role that he is going to apparently divulge more information about this weekend?
So all we know is the title, Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas, which the president says is going to be sort of a new international working group that's going to involve a lot of Latin American countries, that is going to meet this weekend for the first time in Florida. So it's obviously a demotion, and it sort of brings to mind the president's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who was demoted. But similarly, the president didn't want to call it a demotion, didn't want to indicate that he had made a poor choice, and so instead reassigned him to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez, thank you so much.